Hello, this is Dr. Jerry Lloyd. We've been talking about Luke 21, the temple discourse. That was a message that he gave to the apostles, that Jesus gave to the apostles. The last message, the last Monday of his natural life, and the last message that he would give publicly. And we've gone over the first 19 verses, which tell what happened during the apostolic age, the persecution and the death of the apostles. And then he begins to tell what would happen just before the destruction of the temple, just as they had asked. The sign for the destruction of the temple is in the next verse. In Luke chapter 21, verse 20, we see the sign that Jesus had answered when the apostles asked him what would be the sign of the destruction of the temple. And he says, "And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed about with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh." What? That's pretty obvious when a city is surrounded by a huge army, that the desolation is very soon, it's shortcoming. And so, it's kind of like in my mind, I'd say, thanks a lot, Jesus. I was hoping to get a sign where I know to leave. I didn't want to leave right away. So what is this talking about? Well, what happened was Vespasian had come in and ultimately surrounded the city of Jerusalem and had not laid siege to it yet or anything like that. But they could see the armies all around them. And then Nero died, who was the emperor at the time, the Caesar at the time. When Nero died, then Vespasian left Jerusalem and went to Italy, to Rome, to be crowned as Caesar, to be the next Caesar. He's the one that built the Colosseum, Vespasian. And so when he left, the Christians left the city of Jerusalem. And then a year later, Titus came back. That would be Vespasian's son, and he did ultimately destroy. Let me read you what it says about, what Josephus says about these events as far as how they apply to Vespasian. "And now when Vespasian had given answers to the ambassadors that Nero was dead, and had disposed of the places of power justly, he preferred to go to Rome rather than to go to Alexandria, because he saw that Alexandria, Egypt, was sure to him already, but that the affairs of Rome were put into disorder by Vitellius, who also wanted to be Caesar. And so he went to Rome to be, and eventually was crowned as Caesar. Just as what Jesus had said. The city was surrounded by Vespasian. Then Vespasian left. All the Christians, knowing the prophecy of Jesus, they left, or if they didn't, they were foolish. They left, and then when Titus came back, they were spared the death and destruction that took place a year later. Let's see what it says here. "And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe to them with child, and to them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people." A couple things I want to point out is there's no huge urgency here as far as what we will read later at another time. Because why? They had a year to get out of Dodge, if you wanted to put it that way, to get out of town. And but they were still, if you were giving suck in those days or whatever, that there was some urgency. You didn't want to be there when the siege began. But we also see that it was because of a reason that this was going to take place. And the reason was that it was vengeance. Let's see what the reason is. Over in Hosea, let me read what God says is the reasoning here. In Hosea chapter 5, in verses 14 and 15, God says, "For I will be unto Ephraim," Ephraim's name was also changed to Israel, "I will be unto Israel," which was the northern kingdom, "and a young lion to the house of Judah." So that both of them, one country of Israel. Even I will tear and go away. I will take away, and none shall rescue him. I will go and return to my place, Jehovah speaking, till they acknowledge their offense. Till they acknowledge their offense and seek my face. In their affliction, in the tribulation, they'll seek me early. Jesus says in the Gospels, when he's approaching Jerusalem in his triumphal entry on the back of the donkey, "And when he was come near, he beheld the city, and wept over it, saying, If thou hadst known, even thou at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace. But now they are hid from thine eyes, for the days shall come upon thee, that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee round, and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation," because they didn't recognize the Messiah, Jesus. And then what would happen after this? God would leave the children of Israel, and their country would actually be cease to exist for 2,000 years until 1967. It says, "For the children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, and without a prince, and without a sacrifice." He's talking about now during the time after the apostolic age. There'd be no king of Israel, there'd be no prince, no heir to the throne, and without a sacrifice, apparently the temple would be destroyed. He's talking about way over in the Old Testament in the book of Hosea. "And without an image, and without an ephod," there'd be no priestly garments, "and without a teraphim. Afterward shall the children of Israel return and seek the Lord their God and David their king, and shall fear the Lord and his goodness in the latter days." So from the time of the destruction of Jerusalem until the Lord's second coming, they would not have their sacrifices which would begin again in the 70th week of Daniel. So we see that these things are prophesied. Let's see what else he says here. "For these are the days of vengeance, that all things that are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. For there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled." This is the first the apostles had ever heard of the times of the Gentiles. In fact, it may have been the first that anybody heard of the times of the Gentiles. Oh, the Old Testament talks about reaching the Gentiles, and the Gentiles coming and worshiping, but it doesn't say that there would be a time specifically for the Gentiles. And what is the one characteristic? That Jerusalem would be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Jerusalem, after 70 AD, AD 70, Jerusalem was trodden down of the Gentiles until 1967. That is the age of the Gentiles. That's the Gentile age. Now, want to see something else here that Josephus records. It said here that they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of Gentiles be fulfilled. Listen what Josephus says about the destruction of Jerusalem. "Now the number of those that were carried away captive during this whole war was collected to be 97,000, as it was the number of those that perished during the whole siege. 1,100, that would be 1,100,000. 1,100,000, the greater part of whom were indeed of the same nation. So these things are recorded in history as accurate, but they were prophesied even more accurately by Jesus before they took place. If you find these things interesting, you might subscribe so that you can hear what happens, because the next part is also something that they didn't know about, and we'll approach that next time. This is Dr. Jerry Lloyd. Subscribe, like this, and share it with your friends. Thank you very much.